examine any event, any human event, in terms of the things that have led up to it, as you go back, it very quickly becomes a boil of complete accidents. You cannot say that there is any real causality to anything. It's just this massive events which just happened to come together, and somebody got murdered. And then you have to say whether the vicar did it in the drawing room with an axe. And you look at that and you go, how can I do that? What is a vicar? I mean, let's start by asking what a vicar is. Light is, I hope, the perfect space opera. It just entangles itself with slightly more modern ideas of what the universe is than most space operas. And it's a commentary at the same time. But I see no difficulty. I don't see an either or there. I don't see a set of oppositions. I see it as my job to do both. Even if you're going to satirise space opera, and across the whole trilogy, it's certainly well satirised. It's well parodied. Anybody who doesn't get the humour there, anybody who tries to read it seriously, is going to seriously miss the point of those three novels. But at the same time, as far as I'm concerned, as a space opera reader, and as a reader of science fiction, because he liked it to blow his mind, I've given very good value for money. The assistant, who has no name, spends the entire book trying to name herself, trying actually to bring some kind of, since she's one of the least human characters in the book, trying to make some kind of human definition of herself and of what it is. She constantly asks people, or herself, does a person like me, ... The classic line is, does a person like me murder too many people? She's constantly asking these questions of the most inappropriate people, the people she meets in bars, people who are scared, rigid of her, and don't know how to answer, because she so clearly is not human. And yet at the same time, we might ask, is that not, wholly human to go into bars and ask people you don't know whether you're human or not? It seems to me to define humanity in its present parlous condition, that it is constantly asking what it is. Science is a fantastic toolkit, and it's a fantastic aid to exploration, but it may not be anything like a philosophical description of the universe. That may not be its purpose. That's certainly not its practical purpose. I want to believe that the universe is not soluble by human beings. I mean, I might as well be open about that to start with. I'm not really interested in a universe that is soluble by human beings. I think science is a really great project, but I think that its utterly basic assumption has to be that the universe is explicable, that it's solvable, that it's understandable, that in the end, one way or another, we will get to the bottom of it. And frankly, I hope we never do. Thus the constantly repeated theme in Light, always more after that. I'd be very happy with the universe which was a series of infinitely receding backdrops. I don't think that necessarily makes me a post-structuralist or a postmodernist, or neither am I necessarily calling into question, 2,000 years of the Western metaphysic, etc., etc., etc. It's not that. It's just that it seems to me common sense that actually none of this is resolvable. We don't seem to have the machinery to resolve it. And even if we have, I don't want that. I liked the idea of a universe which, were you to be able to get break down through the layers, would reveal itself to be constructed of, as it were, vortices of algorithms, made of algorithms, made of algorithms, made of algorithms. And that's the concept of the mathematics. The mathematics operates across the entire dimensionality of the universe at some ultra basic level. But it is only a lot of algorithms. That's all it is. And that's all matter is. And that's all we are. And that's all our actions are. And that's the kind of metaphysical equivalent of the plug hole at the centre of the universe. My idea was that the universe would have a plug hole, and that it had better be, since this was a science fiction novel, it had better be a physics kind of a plug hole. And at the time I was very interested in the idea that somehow a black hole was almost designed to hide the singularity, because the singularity is too singular to be. It would somehow be deeply wrong for the universe to be able to perceive a singularity. I loved this, even though I knew it was a form of words and that it had nothing to do with the maths or the physics. I very much like the idea of a sort of plug hole in the universe, which was too appalling even for the universe to see. So I thought, well, we'll have one of those then. Because space opera was never trash. It was never proper trash. It was never proper pulp, because it avoided the absolutely central understanding of pulp, which is that everything is about sex, jealousy, and death. Pulp noir, the pulp detective story, understands that by 1920 the world is about Saturday night. That's what it's about. It's about fashion, all the way from a song to a belt buckle. They're all focused in noir on the one thing that counts. Saturday night, getting sex. It's an art to do with and based upon sex. And somehow space opera missed out on that. We were told, what do you associate space opera with? You associate it with rollicking. You know? A rollicking space opera. I've seen that phrase repeatedly in the 50s and the 60s. What did you get? Well, you got a bit of yo-ho-ho singing, some drunkenness, but you never, ever, ever got Saturday night. The space opera didn't have a Saturday night. So one of my ideas was that I would put Saturday night back in a space opera, and especially in empty space. Science fiction doesn't get used up. The imagery doesn't get used up. It's not finite. There isn't, and the future doesn't get used up. There's this idea somehow that science fiction is supposed to predict the future, and that if it continues to predict the future at this sort of rate, it will have used up all the possibilities of prediction, which is just so nonsensical as a position that you don't really know what to say about it, do you? Because, for a start, you're not predicting the future, because you can't. Science fiction did not predict the world we have today from the point of view of the 50s. Its attempts to do so were so wrong. You know, it missed the most obvious things that happened. It predicted loads of things that didn't happen. So how can you waste that? How can you somehow overuse your predictive capability? How can science fiction somehow undo itself in this way by predicting the future? Well, of course it can't. And the reason it can't, and the reason you don't need to be worried about that, is that it's a field of the imagination. It's nothing to do with science when it comes to it. It's nothing to do with predicting the future or being right about anything, or even being half right about anything. It's not that far different from fantasy. It's a fiction of the imagination, and one of the ways to get a cheap imaginative effect, and I take full responsibility for this, is to mix and match things. You know, if it was good enough for the surrealists, if it worked for them, it will work for me, and it does. in empty space, you end up at 1.0. But that's a spoiler too.